Hi, ma'am. Good
Hi,
afternoon.
good afternoon.
Uh, Ma'am, your voice is coming very low. I think you need to turn up the volume. Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, one sec. I'm just
Okay.
adjusting.
Yeah.
Is it better? Am I okay?
Yeah, it's better now. Okay. So, ma'am, we'll start at 3:15.
All right.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll start with the introduction, just like we did it earlier, if you remember. Yeah. Okay. Hello, everyone, and a very good afternoon again. I, Tanisha Tyagi, welcome you back to the second session of the day for our amazing S Chance CPD sessions. We are thrilled to continue this journey of learning, discovery, and even some exciting prize opportunities. Just a reminder for those joining us midstream, we will be hosting two quizzes today and tomorrow. The winning participants will walk away with fantastic Amazon vouchers worth up to a total of rupees 20,000. Now let's dive right into the world of science education. For this session, we are honored to have Ms. Sonia Singh as our esteemed speaker. Ms. Singh is a powerhouse in the educational field. Currently, she serves as the principal of a primary school in Hyderabad, but her expertise extends far beyond school leadership. Ms. Singh is also a trained instructional designer and content writer, bringing a wealth of knowledge to curriculum development. With a strong foundation in teaching learning practices honed through participation in various IB and Cambridge workshops, Ms. Singh combines her impressive academic background, a science degree from St. Stephen's College, Delhi University, and a master's in education, with over 15 years of experience in the classroom. But before we hand over to Ms. Singh, a quick note about the prize. Remember, we'll have the quiz after the final session starting at 4:30 p.m. today. The top two participants with the most accurate answers will win Amazon vouchers worth up to rupees 10,000. So stay tuned, you could be our next big winner. So let's go through the housekeeping rules. Participants will be muted throughout the entire session. Please ensure you have a pen and a paper to note important information. The chat box will only be enabled during the Q&A round and as required by the speaker. To receive your e-certificates, please fill out the feedback form that will be sent to your registered email ID after the session. Remember to participate in the quiz. After the session, we'll share the quiz link with you. With great anticipation, I now invite Ms. Sonia Singh to share her insights on teaching science. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Tanisha, for such a warm welcome. And thank you, participants, for being here today afternoon. And I know everyone working days and the afternoon gets a little heavy. I assure you, I will try to keep it as engaging and interesting and not bore you with the things. So, without wasting any further time, just allow me 30 seconds and I'm going to share my screen and we'll go ahead with it. So, like already mentioned, and you're all aware, what we are going to be delving into is going to be project based learning in science education. In case any one of you teaches anything over and beyond science, please remember that project based learning can be used across any of the subjects and maybe at any stage of life. So, doesn't necessarily really have to be science. Of course, during the session, I will be giving you examples more related to science, but feel free to use them anywhere that you feel you would like to. So let's begin with something really light. This is something I think each one of you as a teacher would have felt that what exactly is my role in this? How am I going to be completing all of this? How do the assessments happen in this? So there are a lot of questions when we work on project based learning. And that's exactly what your key takeaways are going to be today. What we are going to be looking into is understanding the PBL really well, try and figure out what are the core principles for designing out a PBL, which will help you finally design authentic PBL units and not something for the sake of it. Having done these designing, how do you really assess your students? That is what we'll be taking into. And finally, what does your classroom look like? Are you giving a supportive PBL environment? So, this is what we'll cover in this quick, short 50 minutes, maybe. So, in the chat box, what is the word or the phrase that comes to your mind when you think of planning the project based learning? So, I'm not really looking at the definition of project based learning. I'm asking your feelings, your thoughts. What is it that comes to your mind when you are told plan out a PBL unit? You please enter it in the chat. Concept learning, some model, new and creative ideas. do and learn. Wow, hands on, creativity, inquiry, informative. Wow, that's really, really nice. So some of the most popular words that I can see in that is experiential, inquiry, hands-on. These are words that have come in. And I know for a fact that in today's time, for the new Gen Z, what we are looking at is making the learning as relevant as possible to them. Gone are the times when we were in school and we studied because we were told to study, because we did something because our teacher said that this is what you're supposed to do. So your project-based learning actually has in the heart inquiry. And inquiry is nothing but having a lot of questions. It is something like, if you take the example, if you need to find your route in a new town, you would go to an inquiry counter and start posing questions. And that's exactly what you need to develop in your students. You need them to actually have questions. And what are those questions? How will you ensure that these are authentic? You need to connect them to the child. The child needs to know, why does it make a difference to him? And he will only know it makes a difference to him if it is connected to a real world problem. He needs to take the ownership and accountability. So you need to build that autonomy for him. It is him or her as a child who's going to be learning. So gone are the times of when we used to dictate as teachers that, okay, do this. And finally, if you make your assessments, which are meaningful, they are not assessments only because you want to grade them or you want to give them marks. They are not assessments to give them as judgments, but they are for reflection. They are feedbacks with a feed forward to understand what is the next step. Then is the only way you will find that you will bring out the high quality of learning that we expect this generation to have. When you do all of this, that is when you have an authentic project based learning. So, if I was to identify the basic principles in project based learning, what makes a good project based learning unit? The first aspect that I would think of is authenticity. They have to be authentic. Why am I doing this? Not for the sake of doing this, not because my curriculum demands, not because my textbook says, but they have to be authentic. So if I give a project to a child and say that, okay, create a spacecraft so that you're going to sit in it and actually go into the space, at that particular age, it may not really be authentic, because is the child really doing it? No, the child is not really going to do that. But if I tell the child that, why don't you go to an organic farm and understand that what is the role of water, what is the role of soil, that is authentic, because that is what he will really do. So I think when you think of a PBL unit, ensure that your project is authentic and not a fictitious or a fiction novel out of it. Make them relevant. When I say relevant, it's the idea is make it relevant to the age group, make it relevant to their interests, make it relevant to their needs. A lot of times I have seen teachers will pick up something which doesn't really go with the interests of that age group, and the child is still trying to figure out how does it really look like. So the child loses the interest. If you can pick up their interest levels. I know for a fact children who are going to be 13, 14-year-olds, they're going to be heavily into technology. They are going to be heavily into your sports. Why not pick up a project which is relevant in that particular way? You would have automatically won your students over. Have authentic inquiry. Begin with a question. Get them to understand that good questioning skill is sometimes better than finding the right answer. Because only when you have good questions will you get the correct answer. Because bad question may give you an answer, but it may not be the right one. Collaboration. In today's time, we need collaboration. We need to develop this skill. Your projects, avoid getting individualized projects. Try and get into projects which will inculcate collaboration among them. Even now, NEP lays so much of stress on collaboration. Our 21st century skills talk about collaboration, because this is the skill even when they grow up, is going to be something that they are going to be using. Give them the autonomy. Your project should be designed in such a way that the child has the ownership, he has the agency to decide how is it he's going to do, what is it that he's going to use, how does he want to present it, does he want to make a certain prototype model, does he want to just present it through slides, does he want to create charts, does he want to just talk about it. Give them that choice, because only when you give them that choice, they take the ownership that it is their learning, and they will take charge of it. And finally, on a constant basis, your PBL units, when you design, must have regular reflections. You as a teacher must design it in such a way that maybe, if not on a daily basis, but at least after 2 or 3 days, pause, give them time to reflect. What could have gone better? What is it that hasn't been done? What is the next step? What do we need? So give them those reflections. It is these reflections where your role will come in, because that is when you facilitate and you support them. You support them at this stage and take a step back after that and see how beautifully they take on from here. So, while designing and thinking of project based learning, I think these are the 6 most important core principles you need to keep in mind. So let's look at something. You cooking or baking activity. Okay, if you create a project on this, what do you think it is? Is it an authentic PBL unit or is it not? You can enter your thoughts in the chat. Yes or no? Okay. Uh, I've seen a lot of yeses coming in. Okay. Uh, it again depends that how are you going to design it. If you are just asking them to cook something, suppose it's a home science class, you've given them a recipe, or they are seeing from somewhere a recipe, could be Google search, could be anything else, and they're cooking or baking. Trust me, that is not project based learning. Let's look at the second one, poster or a display board presentation. Is it a project based learning? Yes or no? No, exactly. A lot of people have already written in this. Craft and art projects where you create something. Yes, only in case if you give them the freedom to make something that will actually get them to learn how maybe different colors interact with each other, then is when it will be an authentic. So let me give you an example. If you were trying to get children to understand, suppose, viscosity or the fluidity and stuff like this, and you gave them different paints and you said that, okay, create a project, in that they would be able to learn that do these paints mix with each other or do they not. If I add in oil, what happens when in watercolor I add oil. That learning will be project, but if they just replicate something which they have learned, that is not project based learning. Taking them out on field trips or excursions. So field trips and excursions can be a part of project-based learning for them to only gather information. Field trip or excursion in itself is not project-based learning. Again, classroom debates and role-playing exercises. This again, until and unless it is just a part of how a child is going to show the learning, could be a project based learning. Otherwise, it is not a project based learning. So I think all of us, what we need to be really careful about is what is the kind of tasks that we are creating. Multiple number of times, what we end up doing is that we mistake doing a project with project based learning. So, to explain it very simply, If it is just project, it is like having a dessert after your complete meal. That means you've taught or you've done a particular concept, the whole concept has got covered, and in the end, you've said, okay, let's do a project. That is not called project based learning. That is just called doing a project. So if you have done something on, suppose, respiratory system, and the children have learned how respiratory system works, but towards the end, all that they are doing is they are creating a model of that, which is those two bottles and the balloon and things like this. That is not project based learning. That is only a project. If your children have learned everything about different habitats and then they create a diorama in the shoebox, that is not project based learning. That is only a project. Project based learning is like having your main course. You start with a question and you continue doing that. So all the learning is happening while they are doing the project. Project is only the end product. That actual thing that you get is the end product. But reaching till that end product, that whole process is when the learning happens for the child. So there is a little difference that happens. When you do a project, it is always done at the end, whereas a project based learning is a unit in itself. That is what actually the learning is. Project based learning is always driven by your student inquiry, whereas the project at the end is generally what the teacher has given. Not always, but most of the time. Project based learning plays a lot of stress on the process, whereas doing a project is usually the final product that we look at and not the process. We could align it to the academic standards and success skills, also your project, but usually in your project based learning, this whole time you have to keep focusing on the academic standards and the skills that they have. And most important out of all of this, that I would say that project based learning has to be connected to real world context. If it is not connected to real world, then it becomes like a project and it is not authentic and it is not relevant. So children have to have that question where it connects them to the world, where they understand, why am I learning this? Am I learning because I only need the marks, because in my report card that's what I need? Or am I learning because when I'm going to apply it in my real life? That is the difference that we need to remember when we work on project and project based learning. So if that is the difference, let's come on to the fact of how do we really design these effective units. So we're going to be doing the how of PBL. Like I said, it is inquiry. First step has to be an essential question. So I'll give you a very, very simple example. So, in one of my schools, little children, they were learning about habitats. And the teacher somehow showed the picture of a polar bear sitting on one of the glaciers which had melted. And it just got into the discussion where she spoke about the fact that, how our actions are making all the glaciers melt. And there was this little kid in grade 2, and he questioned the teacher that all that is okay, ma'am. I am trying to figure out that how come sitting here in Delhi, my action is actually affecting the polar bear who's sitting so far off. Now, that was the essential question. And that question started the inquiry, which went along the project based learning. So, those are the kind of questions that I'm saying that always start with something which is connected to the real world. It's authentic, it is relevant, it is something which the child understands as to why am I learning this. Once the question is out, you have to start designing a plan. Because we believe in giving the ownership to the students, start designing this with the students. So when I'm saying designing, start talking from the fact, okay, if these are your questions, what are the different answers and from where will you get them? Are you using Google search? Are you going to invite guests? Are you going to meet people? Do you want to go on a field trip? So all of these things is where your designing happens. You collect all the information. So students will also talk about the fact, fine, I will do Google search, I will read up books, I will go here, I will gather all the information. And then what? So your next plan for the design is that what after that? You've got the information. Then what are you going to do? What do you want to do? So all of that must come in. While all of this is happening, the biggest struggle that all you teachers will come across, or will say this right now also, is the time. Where do we find the time to do this? Because we are always running to complete our curriculum. So, the most important aspect while designing a project is that you do create a schedule also. So create your timelines. Children must have those timelines, because for them, I think even when they turn 18, it's not easy to visualize how much of stuff I can complete in 4 hours, how much of stuff I can complete in 6 days. So help them create a schedule regularly. Keep monitoring the student progress of the project. Be with them. Don't do it for them. Don't tell them what to do. Just be with them. So maybe you will notice that there are children who are struggling on a certain concept and they are unable to find that. Give them a little option that, do you think this will help? So keep monitoring it. It is these monitoring parts, when you are with your students, you will understand in depth how much your children are learning, because there are children who may not be able to bring out the best end product, but you will realize that through the process their learning was way better than a lot of children whose end product was very good. So that is why monitoring the students is extremely important. And then you do your assessments. Once you've got the assessment, the next step is extremely important. You evaluate the experience. That means from children and you as a teacher, evaluate that. How good or bad was it? Can it be modified a little? For the children also to be able to tell them that, yes, I did this project and it was beautiful and I think I was fantastic at it, but maybe if I was to redo it, I would do it differently. So pose that question to them, that what if you had to do it differently? What is the difference that you will work on? Pose that question to yourself as a teacher. If I was supposed to give this unit next year, how is it going to be different? What is it that I felt that did not go well? So when you evaluate your own self, you will find every year on year, your project based unit starts becoming more better. It starts becoming authentic and it takes on an extremely beautiful role. You could even talk from the fact of the timing this time was wrong. So, what is it next time that you can do? So, start working accordingly on that. Okay, so I think I've spoken enough. So, quick in your chat. So, let's think about it. I think one of the most common topics is going to be human body systems, right? I think everyone, whether you teach lower grades, whether you teach higher grades, even if you're not a bio teacher, that's the reason I've put this, because I think everyone understands human body systems. So, if you as a teacher, if you were to teach digestive system, circulatory system, or any of these systems, how would you do it through an authentic PBL task? Because difficult to do it hands on. After all, you're not going to cut open a body and take out the system. So how do you think you would be able to do this? Just that one sentence or one quick line, if you can put into the chat box, that how do you think you'll be able to do that? Why does our breathing rate increase after jumping? Using a diagram, model based, using a model, collect the picture, clay model. What do you think happens to the roti? Okay, so what I'm seeing, most of you are talking about model. Okay, a lot of you are talking from the fact that, okay, what happens to the roti after this and things like this. Again, try and think, is that really a project based unit? Is that really something which will give the autonomy to the child? How will he make that model if he doesn't know what digestive system looks like? How will he make that model of a respiratory system if he doesn't know how does it look like? That means you will end up teaching him. So the teaching part should not happen. So what we are trying to say is that if you have to do something like this, you've posed a question. So there was somebody who posed a question in this, what happens to the roti that I have eaten? So if that question has been posed, now the children have to start finding out. Where does it go? So children will use layman language. Okay, obviously they will not understand esophagus or any of those things, but they can start talking about, okay, I have a food pipe. I'm going to chew. My saliva is going to make it soft. It's going to go into my food pipe, and then it just goes into my stomach, if those are things. So you have to tell them that, okay, your final output, you have to explain to me what happens to the roti that you have eaten. Some children will use different research books. Some people will go and meet a doctor. They will start gathering that information and let them present it the way they want to. So not everyone will make a model. And remember, you do not teach that first. You have just posed that one question. That one question will lead it. So for the older students, if any one of you teaches higher grades, even if you put up a question like this, where you say that, what is the impact of sedentary lifestyle on human body systems? So that's your question. So now every group, so there could be a group which is working on digestive system, there could be a group which is working on circulatory system, there could be a group which is working on respiratory system. They are going to try and find the answer. What happens if I have a very sedentary lifestyle? And let them try and gather all that information. Then purely their choice. However they want to present it. They want to physically do things and show it to them. They want to collect data and show it like a data bar graph or whatever. That is up to them how they do it. It could be the impact of sedentary lifestyle. It could be the impact of eating junk food. It could be the impact of pollution on human body systems, but make it relevant, make it something that they hear every day. And then they start working on it. So model, not really so important. It is the whole process that which the child should be able to do that. So I hope I'm making sense. In case if you feel or you have questions, please put it in the chat and I will keep adding that. So when you use AI tools in that, the only difficult situation that comes out through AI is it gives you the answer totally. So there is no process that gets involved. If you use any of those simulations, it'll just show you what happens and there is no process. It's like watching a YouTube video or watching a three-dimensional thing. So it's not really a project. There is a lot of difference between project-based learning and watching something happening. So that is the kind of thing that we will need to have difference about. So am I making sense? Is this clear? Okay, so in case if you do have questions, please just put them in and I will take them up for sure. So taking this one step ahead, if this was the kind of project that you had given, where sedentary lifestyle, or think of the effect of pollution on human body, or think of junk food on human body, and you have a group of students who worked on maybe your circulatory system, some on your skeletal and muscular system, some respiratory, some whatever, different groups. Think like a science teacher. What are all the concepts that can get covered in this? So if any one of you is non-science, please think of the non-science subjects that can get covered in this. So through this project, there is a lot of learning that can come through. What all do you think happens in here? So there is a question that has been posed to me directly. It says that whether the project-based learning should go home or should it also be in the classroom? According to me, logically, everything should happen in the classroom. I don't think we should send things back home for parent. But if it ever involves, recording of certain data, which is through the day, it'll by default go back home also. But creating a model back home really doesn't make sense. So a lot of skill development. I can see that somebody's also mentioned maths about measurement, calorie count, addition, subtraction, could be data handling, collection, analytical skills, analysis. Yes, fantastic. So great. I think when you also vocabulary development, fantastic. This is going to, even if any one of you is an English teacher or a language teacher of any particular subject, you will find through this, the children actually develop the right kind of vocabulary. Another concept that comes on very strongly in this is going to be interdependence. You talk about them, how things are dependent on each other, how things have an effect. So the cause and effect kind of an aspect also come into this particular example. Art can be integrated. Very true. I've had teachers doing this particular unit where they've integrated with art because a particular group wanted to show a complete drawing of a silhouette of a human being. So when they had to do that, the art teacher actually showed the proportions. So proportions was covered in maths, and then they showed that, okay, your forehead is always 4 fingers, your chin is always 2 fingers, the distance between your nose and your lips is 1 finger. That's the kind of proportions for drawing also that can come up when you teach. So a lot of things can happen at the same time for your project based learning. And when you do that particular aspect together, the struggle that you have for time actually reduces, because all your different subjects also start getting covered. A lot of your other concepts start getting covered in that. So you make up for that time in that. So the same project starts getting followed into your math lesson. It will also, the art teacher will also pick that same thing up, and you will not struggle with time there. And that is how you design out a project based learning. Yes, it is interdisciplinary and integration. And I'm sure NEP, that is exactly what it talks about. So if you need to integrate it with any one particular subject, take up a choice as what you want to do it for. Do you want to do it for language development? Do you want to do maths with it? Do you want to do arts with it? Whatever you want to do. You could also connect it a little back into history, and where you talk about the changes that have happened in human body right from our, caveman days to today, how that has changed. So the whole idea of projects look really, really nice, I can assure you. They are great fun. Children thoroughly enjoy themselves because there is no constant rote learning that happens. What children really struggle with is when you tell them that you have to learn by heart how this diagram is drawn, and they will forget these typical, bio names in it. So they are still struggling to spell out alveoli and, all of those kind of things. And they're trying to figure out, how am I going to write this? What does it really look like? So that is a struggle. But the moment you make it into project-based learning, it becomes extremely interesting in that particular aspect. You could, if your children are very young and you want to do a project-based learning on, say, something like forces, push and pull, take them onto the jungle gym, throw the question there. What makes me come down faster on a slide? And that's when the thinking will begin. So usually a project-based learning will always end with a product, but always remember, it's the process. It's the process which is more important, and not really just the product. And that product which comes up in the end is not done after all the learning has happened. These are the two biggest myths that we have and the two biggest mistakes that we do. Our project is created after the whole unit has been learned or taught, and then we ask them, okay, now you create a project and show it to me. That is not project-based learning. Any other questions so far before I move on to assessments? Okay, so no questions as of now. How to deal with question answer for foundation stage. Okay, so for very little ones, I think what you will need to do is your projects have to be much smaller, because they can't do a very a timeline which is going to last for about 4 days. So their projects have to be extremely small. Let me give you a little example. I know for a fact that the younger children do a unit which is on float and sink. So a lot of times, what do we do? Trying to make it experiential. What do? We give them stuff, we give them a water tub, and we tell them, okay, let me know what is it that floats and what is it that sinks. It's one of the most popular ways of how float and sink is taught. That is not project-based learning. Okay, because the reason being, I have given no curiosity, no inquiry in it. I have already told the children that you put things inside and something will float, something will sink. So I've already given that out. So your question should only be, what happens to this? That's it. Because you will realize there'll be certain things which may completely float on top. There will be things that completely sink. There could be things which are just in between. There could be things which are half inside water and half above water, or either of the ways. Or they could be not touching the floor of the water, not on top, but somewhere in middle. Get your children to voice those. So the little babies will use their own language to explain this to you. Once they have explained, then give them that terminology of what float and what sink is. So their whole project is to get up and find things eventually, which are floating and which are the things which are sinking. Connect this same project to your vocabulary where you are talking about heavy and light. So that can also start getting connected. So this whole one long project will end up bringing vocabulary for children and also developing conceptual understanding. So the project really doesn't need to be, I would say, a creative. Who says creativity is not something that we are assessing in this? If you see under core principles, none of them was creativity. The whole idea was that it brings out a lot of creativity from students. But that is not one of the core principles. The core principles are your authenticity, relevance, inquiry, and all of those things, collaboration. So those are the things finally what you will assess, and not how creative or beautiful or aesthetically nice the whole project has been. So that should not be assessed. And also something, I don't know, a thing like creativity, it's very subjective. You really can't assess or give marks to it. So when you're asking about how do you get videos in, they can only be used for a child to inquire and gather information. As a teacher, I don't think you should be giving all the videos to them, because you're again making them learn. If they've already learned that and then created a project, it's not project based. If it is through the process that they are trying to find out, then it is project based. So once all of this is kind of done, finally, how does your assessment take place? Your assessments are in these different phases that you have to assess. Your first point should be on that question. The question that you have posed, is the child able to identify, okay, what exactly is the problem? What am I being asked to do? What is my next step that he's doing? That is what is your first assessment. Because if that first essential question is not clear to the child, then I think that whole process will not go the way it is. The product may still come out as the most beautiful product, but the child has not understood anything in it. So the first phase of assessment should be when you identify the problem. Then along with it, your next step comes in. When the project has started, the child is kind of building onto the new knowledge. He's trying to explore, okay, where can I get answers from? How will I pick up this particular answer? Where will I write all of this? That is when he's building on this new knowledge. That's your second phase of assessment. You should assess that particular. Is he picking up the right kind of knowledge? Does he know where to get that knowledge from? Does he know whom to contact? That is your second phase. Finally, is the deep phase, where he's going to go deeper into the understanding, where he's going to analyze, where he's going to compare, where he's going to talk about compare and contrast. He's going to come up with solutions. He's going to try and say, okay, so maybe this is happening because of this. So the pollution is having an effect on our body systems because maybe I'm breathing in that particular, the oxygen is less, and what I'm breathing in, those pollutants are the ones which are going into my lungs. So that is deeper understanding. And finally, can he give out an answer? Does he really have a solution to the problem that he had? Whether as a prototype, whether just spoken, whether in a chart, in any way, is he able to transfer all of that to actually a solution? And that is your final assessment that happens. So your assessments for project-based learning are never that one last assessment. It has to be in these phases. So you will very often come across children who will pose some really amazing questions. So, it will be things like, okay, if you pose them with a picture like this, who will fall first? I mean, I don't want really for children to actually throw somebody down and get that experience and make it that experiential. But if this was kind of a question, how do you think they would find out the answer to this? That who falls down first? The big man, the small man? They can't really throw the man down. We don't really want them to throw the man down. So anything in your chat? Yeah, I know. I mean, I'm not going by the answer. I'm saying you can't throw the man down. What will a child do in this case? How will he find the answer? Okay, that's an amazing thought. Somebody said both will not fall, they are tied. Fantastic. Now, that is what I call critical thinking. Amazing. Okay, so my question is not that I'm posing this question to you and you have to give me the answer who falls first. My question is, when you give this question to children, how will they find this answer? That becomes a project. You tell them that, okay, I have posed this question. Obviously, you cannot throw a man from the top. How will you find out the answer? So there will be a lot of children who maybe on the desk will keep a heavier bottle and maybe will keep a lighter pencil box and throw it down to check which falls first. They could do different things. Maybe they could go out onto the play field, or maybe from the balcony, they will either throw down something heavy and then something light and time it or whatever. That is how they are gaining that knowledge. So assess them that. So, like if I was to assess right now, my first question that I threw defining the problem, I think the first phase assessment really did not go well. Everyone did not understand the question that well. Okay. Whereas the second phase, if you guys were supposed to do it, I'm sure you would have done better. So assess at every stage. So all those four stages that I'm talking about, the four phases, assess your children on all of them, which is extremely important. Yeah, we're still going into the answer. I am not looking at the answer. Okay. You will need to diversify your assessments. Assessments cannot just be paper pencil, because what you need to do is you need to have assessments in different ways. There could be ways where you tell them, okay, stop everything, and now I'm going to question and I want you to answer, and that is your assessment. Okay. It could be in the process when they are working on it, you keep moving to them, keep going to them, ask them, what are they doing? Why do they think this is happening? And you keep taking down your notes of how this is happening. So constantly you can actually assess them in action. How is that happening? How the learning is something which they are gaining. Finally, you can even have students construct their assessments. Students can also tell you that, fine, this is what I'm creating a prototype. So, in my prototype, what I want you to see is how I explain the concept. Please don't go by the dimensions. Whereas you could have a child who can very clearly say that, look at my prototype that I have created, and my dimensions in that are really, really proportionate. So, I want this model to be replicated in real life exactly the way it is because I've been that good at it. So let your children also self construct these assessments. Don't make the assessments according to what we think is right. Because when that happens, I've got this little cartoon for you here which says the boy is telling his friend that I taught Stripe how to whistle. And the friend says, but I don't hear him whistling. And the boy replies, I said I taught him. I didn't say that he has learned it. So we don't want our project to turn out to be like that. So the project has to be for the child. He has to learn, and not because we want it to happen like that. So you have designed a project-based learning. You can also understand how you can do assessments. But what does really your classroom look like? How do you have your classroom? You must have the surprise element in this. I would always say that when you plan out a PBL unit, do not give it away in the beginning. Start with just that big question and throw it out. Change your classroom, what it looks like. It must come in when children enter that room. They have to have that surprise element. They have to know something new is going to start now. That excitement automatically brings in and increases their adrenaline levels, and they are happy and they are looking for that learning to happen. So, even your reluctant learners who feel science is not something that I can do, you will find that they become extremely, extremely excited about it. So, always keep the surprise element in your project based learning. The whole process also. Finally, what is the output? Don't give it away right in the beginning. Let them think on their own. That is why it is extremely important. The next thing is your classroom has to constantly have a re-hook. So there is a hook that you start with. That means you catch the attention of your students. But finally, you have to keep engaging them. Your children have always a tendency to lose track. If the same project continues for 4 or 5 days, in between the third or the fourth day, they've lost. So you will, whether through assessments of different phases or with building excitement, keep re-engaging them, keep going back to them, keep giving out different information, make things interesting for them. Hey, what if you do this particular aspect? So you would. So if you were doing pollution on human body systems, maybe you would just in between present some data about the Delhi pollution that happened. Or you could say, do you know 20 years ago, the pollution levels were this low? So keep re-engaging your students, because if you don't re-engage, children tend to lose interest and the track of how they work. Engagement is the key. So when I say engagement, I'm not talking about just the student engagement. We as teachers cannot give a project and sit back and relax. What we need to do is we need to constantly keep provoking their curiosity. So, your own questioning skills are something that should be there. You should constantly keep asking open ended questions, not closed ended. Do not ask questions that just have one right or wrong answer. Always ask them a question that will bring out multiple perspectives. Only when multiple perspectives will come out, you will find that the project will end in a very, very authentic way. Also, the learning that will come out of that will be something which will be on a much higher level in your Bloom's taxonomy and not at the first three levels of recall and understand. So, that is how you'll have to do. So, build up your own questioning skills and start asking them. Constantly, your questions should be there for your students then. So I'll give you last 10 minutes for questions. And this is something on a very, very lighter note, just a cartoon that when you give out a project, a lot of time where the child says, and with my current project, if that comes out very late, do I give it as a history and not really current affairs? Or
Participants, if you have any questions, please write it in the chat box.
you may do that. Also, projects like just replicating an iPod with mud and twigs is not really a project. Any questions?
Participants, if you have any questions, please write it in the chat box. Thanks a lot.
Sorry, Caitlin.
Should it be a combination of different projects in a class?
So, I'm assuming that you are talking for one particular subject. So, I think if you are picking up the whole concept of suppose human body systems, you could have your children working on different groups. You could have one group working on maybe effective pollution. You could have another one working on junk food or anything like this. So, the concept will remain the same in the class. The driving question could be different in a class. That is something that you can.
Ma'am, there's one more question. Does every subject need PBL?
So every subject may have PBL. The choice is completely yours purely for the fact that every concept may not have an authentic PBL. Because, like we said, the core principles are six. Always remember, keep those six core principles in mind. So, every concept may not have an authentic PBL unit. So, you don't do that. And I think everything, if you start doing on a practical note, you will not be able to complete your curriculum. So, at least through your academic year, have some really good 2 or 3 PBL units which are for your strong concepts, which kind of are carried on every year, and you do.
There's one more question: how to overcome PBL challenges?
So, according to me, the biggest PBL challenge that you can come across is actually nothing but your time, because one is time and one is authentic assessments. That how do you do assessments? Those are the biggest challenges. Timing will come in only when you involve your students in. So if on a regular basis you kind of touch base or monitor your student work, that means whenever your lesson is complete for that particular project, leave those last 3-4 minutes where you step in and you say, okay, fine, this is the timeline we had drawn. Can everyone cross check where we are? So if you've designed the whole project based unit for 5 days, every day meet them. Your children will start actually seeing that, okay, first day I've gone a little slow, maybe the second day I need to make use of that. That is the best way to involve your students. Draw a timeline on the board, draw a timeline on some chart, and you get your students, you get those clothes pegs which we put. You can have one for each group and move it across the days, that this one is moving along the correct timeline that was defined, this one is moving slower. You'll find that children will start working accordingly on that. The second is only assessments, and for assessments, if you can do it in those phases that I mentioned, trust me, your assessments are authentic assessments then.
Mom, there are lots of questions. There's one more: how we can develop skills of a student through the project?
So that the skills you will have to see. So when you are designing, what are the skills? Is your project more on critical thinking? Is your project more on collaboration? Is your project more on research skill? That is what you will need to do. So if I'm going back to my human body systems, and if I'm trying to make it on the effect of pollution, it's really not creative skill anything in that, because I'm not change. I can't be creative with an human body. So but what I can be is critical thinking. I can develop my critical thinking, and maybe I can develop my research skill in that. So you will have to identify, and for every project based learning unit, do not go beyond 2 skills that you focus on. A lot of skills can happen. My God, how did that balloon come in? Okay, my hand gesture, I think. Okay, so you can do a lot of skills, but your focus should remain maximum 2 skills for every project, not more than that.
Okay. What should be the teaching aid in a science class for foundation stage?
You, you, teacher, that is the best foundation stage they understand. For them, their teacher. That is the best that they understand. Along with you, after you, get in pictures. They are very visual. Everything has to be visual. And their little world, which is there, make connections to that little world. So, because children in the summer have already forgotten what the winter felt like. So you'll have to be that careful about it. They have very short memories. So you have to, ask them to get their own pictures, tell them to notice, see, winter is cold, so you're wearing a woolen. So it'll be that kind.
For lower grades, can we set the same 6 rubrics that you spoke earlier?
Yes, yes, you can make that. Only thing is your rubric has to be then simpler in language, because they are your little lower grade. So your everything remains the same. Just the descriptor of the rubric, you make it simple. Language has to be something which the child understands.
If strength of class is big enough, can we have PBL?
Yeah, yeah. I think you can have PBL even if you have just 10 children. And if you have more,
How
fantastic.
How to balance your role as a facilitator and guide with allowing students to take ownership of their learning in the project.
You only monitor, you only regularly keep monitoring them. And even if they are stuck, you give them options. You don't tell them the answer. Give them options of where to find the answer. That is what your role is, and not giving them the answer. Remember, never give out the answer to the children, because the excitement of finding the answer yourself is way more than learning it from somebody else.
Ma'am, there's one more, the last question we'll take. How can we design presentation-based project or assessment for primary class students?
So, when you say presentation based, are you talking about how they actually present it, or I haven't understood the question? So what I'm looking at is what my thought is. Maybe what you are asking is that if it is a primary student, what is the final product that he comes out? How does he present it? That's what the question is. Tanisha, just tell me, am I thinking correct? Is that what?
Uh, I think so. Like it says, how can we design presentation-based project or assessment for primary class student?
The presentation, because I'm trying to figure out that because we as a teacher, we are not presenting, right? So we shouldn't be. We should just be giving the question. So I'm assuming that the child has to present. So if the child has to present, if you have devices for your children, they could use Google Slides or anything. It could be connected to your IT classes or chart papers. Get them to use flip books. You have those accordion books, get them to use. So take a big A3 sheet, fold them into little pieces, and that's how they present. They keep opening one particular part and they keep talking about it. That's the kind of presentation that you have.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thanks a lot for your presentation. It was truly enlightening. Your passion for incorporating project-based learning into science education has greatly enhanced our comprehension. As we contemplate the insights shared today, we are empowered with fresh perspectives and innovative ideas. Let's actively implement these newfound learnings into our teaching methodologies. Thank you once again for your guidance. Your contribution has been invaluable. Let us take the knowledge we gained today and translate it into meaningful actions within our classrooms. A big thank you to all participants for your engagement and thoughtful contributions. We look forward to continuing this conversation in future CPD events. Stay tuned for our final session today at 4:30 p.m., where we'll have another chance to expand our knowledge. And don't forget, there's still an opportunity to win Amazon vouchers worth up to rupees 10,000 in our upcoming quiz. Once again, thank you so much, Ms. Sonia Singh, and to everyone who made today's session a success. We look forward to seeing you at our next session, creating assessment tools to evaluate content understanding in science, with Ms. Surbhi Arora at 4:30 p.m. That's also when we will be conducting the exciting quiz, so be sure to stay tuned. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you.